Hello, everyone. Welcome to the water seminar series of the School of Public Policy, University of California, Riverside. We have today a very special guest to share with us a development that was done, a very important development that was done on forecasting long-range water reliability in the Moulton Niguel Water District. And that special guest that we have today is Monobina Mukherjee. And there is no more pride and satisfaction to present a speaker than to present Monobina, who is one of us. Monobina graduated with a PhD from the University of California, Riverside, probably 7 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And since then, she just grew up and became a very influential person in the water sector in our region. And she was involved in the development of that water demand forecasting tool that she is going to present, which is an important, very important tool, especially during days of uncertainty, either physical uncertainty or institutional uncertainty that affects the decisions of the water utility with regard to conservation efforts, to development of a budget, to infrastructure plans, and so forth. So I will stop talking now and allow Monobina to start the presentation so that we know exactly what is that tool about and how those of us who are interested can use it for our own purposes. Thank you, Monobina, for doing it, and please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Ariel. That was a great introduction. I feel so honored, and thank you, Mehdi, also for inviting me, to giving me an opportunity to present at the water webinar series at UC Riverside. So as Ariel said, UC Riverside is very close to my heart, so I'm going to take a couple minutes to talk about it before I dive into the technical details of the tool and everything. So I did my PhD in natural resources, economics, and policy from UC Riverside, and Kurt Shorby was my dissertation advisor. Ken Burinclough, Ariel Dinar, they all were in my dissertation committee, and they are the biggest mentors in my life. With their with all the knowledge I gained from them, it kind of helps me survive out there in the water industry. And they were like big mentors. And so it's an asset, that the knowledge that I gained from them. And I, as you will see, like I have been using that rigor that I learned from my in academics. And so yeah, I will talk today about one of my projects, which is the demand forecasting tool. And I will also take the time to acknowledge that I do work in a great workplace where with a great team, where everyone has the rigor in academics, academics and innovative ideas and thinking out of the box. So it does help me to keep the same kind of enthusiasm and excitement in my work. So with that, I will start sharing my screen. And if you can give me thumbs up if you are able to see my screen, the PowerPoint.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not the, yeah, right now it's the PowerPoint. So.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, so basically, as I said, I work with Moulton Niguel Water District, and I am a senior water resources analyst here, and I help the planning and the finance department with a lot of analysis and tools. And we work on different projects. We have an awesome data team here, but this is one of my projects that I thought would align with the audience in this webinar series. So I'm going to talk about this project, long range water demand forecasting for long range planning. So first, those of you who are not so familiar with Moulton Niguel Water District, we are located in South Orange County. And here there are approximately around 170,000 customers that we serve. And I am sure like you travel to Orange County to go to some of the beaches. So some of the amazing beaches are here in Laguna Niguel, Dana Point, Aliso Viejo, Mission Viejo, San Juan Capistrano. So these are all the cities that we serve. Yeah, it is like we have a decent size of customers here, and there are a handful of cities that we serve for border. So our water district is heavily dependent on imported water, and 34% of our water supply comes from Colorado River, 41% comes from State Water Project, 25% comes from like local supplies, which is like recycled water. We are heavily dependent on imported water, and that's what's make it more important for us to do more planning and forecasting, so that in terms of uncertain times, as Ariel said, we have good, like we're in good shape to meet any kind of uncertainty. So talking about like, I'm sure a lot of the audience have already like, they deal with statistical models on a daily basis. And we have, in a model, we have a whole lot of variables. So I have, I think around 13 to 14 variables in my model here, but I'm sure it's like not a big deal for any of the researchers who built and analyzed statistical models, because I remember during my research at UC Riverside, it did have like 32 variables in my econometric model. So I think having 13 to 14 variables is also helps control for a lot of variables, and as there is a lot of uncertainty, we see that a lot of things keep changing, the precipitation patterns, the weather patterns, and like talking about like variability, yesterday I saw there was some hail on my car, like snow on my car, and I was like, wow, snow in California is like kind of, I see it in the mountains, but like on my car was pretty interesting. So yeah, and then we saw what happened in Texas. A lot of like, we are seeing a lot of variability. So any forecasting model, especially if it has to do with water demand, we need to account for a bunch of factors that can influence demand in the long run. And things, variables keep changing over time. So it's definitely, we need to look over a span of time rather than looking over a static period of time. So with that, yeah, so this reminds me of like a good joke, like if we cannot, like if we want to go, we just cannot need like, for that we need a lot of like other things like the bats, balls, and sneakers. So all the variables I perceive like are bat, balls, and sneakers that help us achieve a goal where we are like kind of going more closer to our forecasting, more accurate forecast, so that we hit the goal. So with that, so so I will start talking about all the variables that go into this forecasting model. So first off, we have a budget-based rate structure, which means that there is a water budget for each customer. So there is an indoor budget and there is an outdoor budget. So the indoor budget is based on the number of people in the household. The outdoor budget is based on the landscape area, the plant factor. Plant factor is how much water a plant needs based on where it is at. Evapotranspiration, like at the rate at which it transpires water in the plant transfers water into the atmosphere. So all of those determine the outdoor budget. So this, I think, is it's great to have a budget-based rate structure, because then it gives us access to all this great data over time, which we actually use in a bunch of analysis. And then we also see the level of efficiency of customers over time. Based on like their water usage over time, based on like what kind of rebates they have participated in. So those are all the water efficiency data that we have that also goes into the model. Then of course, it's no surprise we need the population data to see like how the population will change over time. We receive the data from CalSTAT Fullerton Center for Demographic Research. And then new developments, like if the cities, they develop over time. For example, the cities, the general plan of the cities have the information on about like how many single family residential connections are going to come up, how many commercial connections are going to come up. So these are all the data that we built in, incorporate into the model, so that when we are forecasting, we are also accounting for the new development that is coming in the area. Then, as I said, rebate data, how many people, how many of our customers have participated in the turf removal, what is the square feet of turf removed per year, what is the water savings from that. Also, there are water savings devices. So what are those devices? How much water savings do we get from them? So we have all that data. And then water loss. So we know the water is used for consumption, but sometimes there is a water loss in the system, which is basically if there is a leak or something, then the water gets, we lose that water from the system. So we do have a water loss audit every year, and we kind of quantify that the water loss from the system. That also goes into the model. And then, as I said, we account for the evapotranspiration data to account for the weather variability. So that's the ET data. We have it like, our ET data is actually very robust. We have it on a daily basis, on a daily level. So it's not an aggregated data. So that's a great data that we have, and we do account for that in this model. Yeah, it's kind of tricky to come with a name for a model, but I just like came up with this name that I think I should call it a multivariate temporal demand model. And because it has a lot of variables, and we do go all the way back to 2010 and forecast all the way up to 2050. So it's almost like a 40 years forecast. And in this model, we do take into account the past behavior of the customers, as I said, the land use and development factors, variability in usage, and all the other factors, conservation, weather, and all of those other factors that I mentioned. So with that, I think I will kind of dive into the model here. So can you see the browser? Yes. Okay.
You see the browser.
Okay, awesome. So this is actually the water demand forecasting tool. It is a browser-based application, and a lot of credit goes to Jonathan Cruz and Drew Atwater, who developed this whole model in a spreadsheet. I just took away their ideas and ran and made it into an interactive application. And so it is very flexible, and our planner can interact with it and download different scenarios, or we can interact with it and download different scenarios and analyze different scenarios. So on the left side, these are all the inputs that I just talked about that goes into the model. So first, I'll just go over all this input one by one. So the first thing is the water budget reductions based on the long-term water use efficiency goals. So the state has some policy and regulations like, okay, by 2050, you have to achieve so much of water budget like reduction, which means like over budget usage. And there are some GPCD and plan factor that the state kind of decides that, okay, by 2050, maybe we should go to 45, I'm just saying like 45 GPCD and a plan factor of 0.6. So there could be like different regulations that the state can come up with, and we incorporate all those regulations in the scenarios inside the model. And accounting for those scenarios, the GPCD and plan factor, we kind of quantify how much will be the reduction of over budget usage. So there are like two scenarios here. The total over budget usage, that is tier 3, 4, and 5, and maybe just like the highest tier reduction if we go from the default scenario to a scenario where we, let's say we go to a more, I'll select a more maybe 50 or 0.6. So this will actually change how the state's regulations, if it kind of change the model, accounts for those factors. Then we have, so this tab is actually basically we can see like each of the factors that goes into the model. This actually adds up, or this actually goes into all this. If we want to see, okay, how much the water budget reductions are, what are the conservation, what is the water loss, this we can see by each of these variables, and then we see this total demand, how it will affect the demand forecasting in aggregate. So this tab is actually giving us like each of those factors. So then the next one is goal water loss. So we have a goal water loss, like let's say by 2050, we have we need to be like at 5% of water loss. So we can change it, and let's say we have a more aggressive goal, let's say 4% or 3%. The model adjusts that, and then we have this new numbers which we can look at, and we can analyze, okay, we have a more aggressive goal, then this would be our water loss, and this would be our total, the forecast. So the model kind of accounts for different, it's flexible so that we can, the planner or whoever is analyzing the model can input different scenarios. Then we have our current water loss percentage, which is around like 7%, 0.7. So we do put that into the model. So the approach is, it's like a projection, so over 50 years. So it linear, so based on what the goal is, it linearly projects the number over the range of 50 years. So that's the approach that the model takes. Then the turf removed. Currently, we have like 150,000 turf removed per year, but let's say we reach a saturation and we have like 140,000 instead, or 130,000 instead. We can see like how it affects the conservation number here. This will actually change if we have, if we input different numbers here. So, but we think that 150,000 currently should be around the ballpark of like what we are having of turf remove, square feet of turf remove per year. Then the water savings from turf is around 40 acre feet per square foot per year. If we think that it might be more, you input that number, you can see the changes in conservation. If we think that will be less, then again, the numbers will vary. And then we have the recycled water acre feet conversion. So we do convert some of our recycled water, some of our potable water gets treated and gets converted into recycled water every year. So it's around 50 acre feet. But again, that number can change. And if we change that number, if it's more conversion, again, the model kind of accounts for that here. So the recycled water input will change. DPR. So for those of you who don't, most of you will be aware with the DPR is direct potable reuse. It's still not active, but if the state comes up with a regulation that the DPR can be implemented, direct potable reuse, then we assume like maybe by 2030, we will have direct potable reuse. So we also account for that in the model, like how that would affect our water demand. Then we have the savings from the devices. So we do have, other than the turf, we have a lot of like indoor devices, like high efficiency toilets, clothes washer, outdoor devices like smart timers, drip irrigation. So it's like around 30 acre feet of savings per year from those devices. Again, if we think like we are getting a lower savings, that would affect the conservation number here. If we think actually we are getting a higher savings, the model will actually account for that. This also will affect the demand forecasting here. Then we have the GPCD from new development. So as I said, that there could be like new single family residential connections or multi-family residential connections. The GPCD from that might be 50 GPCD. That's our estimate right now. So we do incorporate that in the model. Again, if that changes to some other number, we will see this graph change and all of this. We do have all the planned connections here: single family residential, multi-family residential, commercial, irrigation. So all the planned connection goes into the model. And if there are any changes, then the model will account for that. Then outdoor plant GPCD for the new development, it's 0.5. We assume that will be 0.55. Again, we can like put in any number right here, and the model interacts with it and updates the forecasting. Climate change. So as I said, evapotranspiration is our best bet on how that would affect the water budgets. So if we assume that it will be 0.5 on an average, but if suddenly there is like a huge spike in the evapotranspiration, we change this number. We see our forecasting will be changing based on that. And then, yeah, so we do account, that's how we account for the variability. And then the population. So 2050, we assume that the population will be somewhere around 172,000. But again, if this population changes, we can change this number right here. And then we can see how the demand also changes based on that. Then we actually have another tab here, which shows this whole forecasting. It breaks it down into by customer classes. So we have single family residential, multifamily residential, commercial, irrigation, recycled water, fire protection, and hydrants, which falls in the other category. So we kind of, based on what the proportion has been of usage for each of these customer classes, we break down this forecast into the customer class forecast, so that let's say we have a need of a more targeted policy to target a specific customer class. If it's residential or irrigation, then we can look at the numbers over 50 years time frame and kind of come up with some policy instead of just like looking at this total demand forecast and all. So that is why we added the customer class forecast, and we also need this information for our planning documents too. So we do need to break it out by the customer classes. And then we have so basically, let me just go over the graph a little bit more. So this is the actual forecasting that the model does, the green line, the purple line, and the red line is our previous forecast. So we take the median and we kind of feel safe to go with the median of our current forecast and the previous forecast. That gives us a range to account for any uncertainty in any of these factors. So we do keep a range either rather than just going with one number. So that's why we have this range. This is our actuals, how our demand is in actual. And so this is basically, it's not that we keep the lower baseline so that we always exceed our expectations, but it's more like we have a range. As in statistics or in economics, we know we always work with the upper bound, lower bound, and then we kind of work with that instead of going with one point estimate. So that's our approach here. And then we can download all this, our planner can, or me or whoever can download all this data and basically look at the spreadsheet and kind of then work with the outputs that are the scenarios that she's selecting, and then analyze the scenarios. So this is then again going back to my presentation. If you can give me a thumbs up if you see my slides. Okay, cool. So we do have like two models here. So one is the calendar year model, and then so we have a calendar year model, and then we have a fiscal year model. So basically we use the fiscal year model for the filling in the data for our urban water management plan, whereas for our long-range water reliability plan, we use our calendar year model. So it's just like how different report works. For some, we need a fiscal year data. For some, we need a calendar year data. We just didn't keep all of them in one to be less confusing on top of like how many variables we have in the model. So yeah, so we do have the two separate applications which can serve like different purposes and serve help to fill in different data requests for our planning documents. So I'll talk a little bit, although I might not be the best person to talk about all our planning documents, but I kind of have some understanding of how this data helps our long-range water reliability plan. The long-range water reliability plan, every water district has it. And this is basically a very important component of water resources planning. So basically what this helps to understand is whether with our existing water supply and infrastructure capacity, if we will be in good shape, not only to meet our existing demand, but our future water demand. So let's say there is some variability in one of the variables, there is less conservation, there is more weather variability or whatnot. So we do in the long range water reliability plan, we kind of state how we have analyzed different scenarios and how this will help to meet our current and future water demands. And if we need a new capital intensive infrastructure, we can also hopefully figure that out from the forecasting model. Like, okay, we think that even in the extreme scenario, we do not need a new capital intensive infrastructure, or it could be the other way around. Like, okay, there is after there's a certain upper bound, but beyond that, we would need a new capital intensive infrastructure. So that would also inform that. And whether we need a new source of water supply, if we need to expand our treatment facilities, or we are, whatever the status quo is actually working great for us. So that's what a long range water reliability plan does and kind of lays out. And this tool tries to help inform those factors. Then urban water management plan is another plan which we have to report to the state. It is like every 5 years. And it actually, in the urban water management plan, we have to show the reliability of our water sources over a 20-year time frame. So it's not just like for a year or 2 years, but for 20 years, we have to show like whatever our demand management measures are, our water supply measures are, if we are in a good shape to have a reliable water supply over a 20-year time frame. And then, as I said, that meeting water use efficiency goals of the state. So if the state changes its regulations, like by 2050, we have to achieve like 50 GPCD, or maybe it's more aggressive, like 40 GPC, 45 GPCD or something like that. So we have this tool to kind of plan for that. And also, we can state like what we have seen by analyzing the scenarios in the urban water management plan. And then what is the used and planned use of recycled water. So to some extent, this tool helps to answer those questions, although not entirely, but it does help to answer some of the questions in urban water management plan. So as I said, like the customer class forecast is also kind of helps in understanding the unique behavior of each of the customer classes. So single family residential customer will not behave exactly as a multifamily residential customer or a commercial customer. So we cannot do an aggregated forecast. We have to identify or tease out like how each of these customers behave, and just to have a better understanding of like each of our customers and their unique behavior. This is actually a great data for a lot of analysis. I'm sure a lot of the researchers or anyone who has interest in water might be eager to dive into. So, oops, this is a wrong slide. This is basically, I don't mean to say like our forecasting is all wrong, but this actually shows that forecasting is always not perfect. It can miss the goal, but we have tried our best by incorporating all these variables to be as close to the actual like how it will be in future. So we're hoping that we will be somewhere around the bird's eye, but I just want to reiterate that models are not perfect. And so that's why we have a lot of people with a policy perspective, planners who have been in this industry for a long time, who give us some perspective on where at which point we should trust more the numbers more or a little bit less, and take our own kind of insight on how it should be. But yeah, I think I'm kind of confident that with all the factors that we're accounting for, we should be having good, like we should be in a good shape to forecast all the scenarios. Also, as you saw, the model is very flexible. So if there is anything changes with the state, if there is any changes, we can add that to the model. It's not a model that gives one output in a spreadsheet or something. We have the model, the coding very flexible so that we can add any scenarios and the model can adapt to that. So as I said, this model again highlights with this model, we can do some policy recommendation. We can inform the planning documents. So I would say, like, I think this is a very useful model. And with that, I think I've come towards the end of my presentation, but there are some people who I would definitely like to thank for all their help on this model. Drew Atwater, Jonathan Cruz, as I said, like they made this model and started all the ideas and everything in a spreadsheet. And I just took away their ideas and just started building on it. And then Laura Roca, she's our senior water resources planner. She gives, as I said, the policy perspective and asks a lot of questions, which helps me to think beyond my technical abilities and incorporate some like kind of see like, okay, whether this would fit into a planning document or not, or what additional analysis will be required. Lindsay Stuvick, she also has been helping a lot with giving some perspective on the policy side of the model. And last but not the least, as I said, I worked with an amazing data team, Anudeep Vanjavakam and Melissa Salazar. They are amazing team members, and with their help and support, I just kind of feel motivated and excited to work every day and come up with some new ideas. So yeah, so those are all my acknowledgements. And again, I want to thank the entire department and the public policy school for giving me to come, have me an opportunity to come back to the place I love and give a presentation. I'm sure that you will have a lot of questions and ideas. If you want to ask me now, I can open the floor for it. You can also, if you like kind of ponder on it, and then if you want to reach out to me later. This is my contact information. But I guess we have some time left, so I'm open to taking any questions right now.
Thanks, Marabina. That was a great presentation. A lot of great information and a nice tool. We do have some questions, and encourage audience to submit their questions through chat box. The first question is that what are some of the measures you use to test how good is your model performing? I'm sure you have some measures you haven't talked about. Did you have any measures to test the performance in sample, out of sample?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So far, we have been kind of comparing our forecasting with the past data, and if it's like way too wild or it's like it's very different from what the past trends have been. But I think as we go more and more into the future, and like every year comes up and we see how the water consumption behavior is, how the conservation is, we get more opportunity to validate it with newer data. So I think I would say like right now we are still comparing it with the past trends, but with every year, I think it opens up an opportunity that we kind of get the new data from a new year and then compare. Like, for example, 2020 is a very strange year. So our forecasting might get a little bit off for 2020. So we are already seeing some like kind of not consistent with how the consumption, although not way too different, but a little bit different. So yeah, I think with more future data, I think we will be able to compare this model and tweak this model if we see that it's not consistent. But so far it's been consistent. The forecasting is not too different from what our past behavior has been.
Perfect, thank you. And there's a clarification question. You talked a little bit about water loss. Is this the water loss at the system level or at the household level?
I think it is at the system level. Yeah, I'll check back and answer, but I am pretty sure it's at the system level that we are.
Okay. Yeah. And then there's a question by Kurt, and to make this a little bit more interactive, I'm trying to allow some of the audience to talk that I know. So I will allow Kurt to talk. If Kurt, if you are there, I'm going to give you the permission to talk and ask your question. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Hi, Marnavina.
Hi.
Good to see you again. Excellent talk. Really enjoyed this. Certainly seems like a useful tool that as I wrote in the chat, that I suspect other agencies will like to replicate, which is a great form of, which are the best form of complement, I think, right? Replication. What I was, the big issue I see going forward is in terms of predictions, is, and you touched on this a bit, and I thought you might be able to expand on it a bit more, is land use, and in particular, the type of housing units that are going to be in, say, Moulton Niguel or any agency, 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road. Because the type of housing, whether it's multifamily or, well, it's single family, going from single family to multifamily and high density, that seems like it will have a really significant impact on water demand. Probably looking back, you may not get the best data on that because it's still, if it changes so much, I'm not sure how backward looking that will help going forward. But anyways, how does your model account for kind of that change, or isn't there going to be a lot of new development in your district?
That's a great question, Kurt. And it's also good to listen to your voice and talk to you. So I think I can speak for our service area. I think it has kind of reached a saturation of new development. I don't think there will be a big change or big addition of any single family or multifamily. There are some new multifamily have already come up. There is a very little room to have more development. So at least for a service area, I think there is not going to be a big development, but yeah, the only way we get this data is from the cities. And so far we have, like, as the projections show, it's a very minor addition to the demand as per the development is concerned.
Okay, thanks. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, sir.
Thank you, Marabina. And there are a couple of questions by Ario, but before I get to Ario, there is a question from audience. Is that the clarification question again? Is this the tool is open for public use, or is this only for your agency staff and people in the agency?
The tool is anyone can share, access the link. It's on our Arc Studio Connect browser. I'll be happy to share the link with others who are interested. So shoot me an email, or I think I can share the tool. It's on my presentation too, if you're sharing my presentation later on. So it's in there. Yeah, we are very, Moulton Niguel and our data team here is very open to collaboration. So we will be happy to share the tool with you. I'll post it on the chat box too, but or I can share with you. I don't know what the good way to share is, but yeah, we are open to sharing the tool and taking a look. And we actually appreciate a lot of feedback. I don't believe the tool is perfect, so any critique on the tool is also very welcome.
Okay, with that, Ario, please go ahead with your questions.
Okay, thank you, Monobina. It was an eye-opening and very interesting. I just want, I had a couple of questions, but when Kurt talked about other agencies, it gave me an idea. One of the way that you calibrate, or you mentioned that you calibrated the model, was to go and use data from the past. You can do the same, not the same, but you can also gain knowledge about the wellness of the fit of the model by trying to use data from other water districts. So this will serve two purposes. One is to calibrate the model and see how it works with different parameters. And second, you will make a good promotion for the model. So you can kill two birds in one shot. But this was just, in response to that point that Kurt made. I understand that this is, we can call it version 1.0 of the model, and you are now trying to improve it. And again, I don't know exactly what you did, because it is my understanding that all those, on the left-hand side, when you talked about all the parameters, so this model is a fixed parameter model, or fixed coefficient model, right? So you plug in data of increase in population. So you say that in the year 2000 and X, there will be X additional homes or X additional people, and so forth and so forth, right? So this is a fixed coefficient model. So my question, or my, not question, but my suggestion, actually also a question, if you can instead, you can also try to build into the model, instead of fixed coefficient, to build into the model also functions. That probably for some of the parameters, you can convert it into functions, and instead of looking at fixed increases or changes, you can look at conditional changes, of one or two other variables. So this is one point. Another point that, again, I'm not sure that you have considered is, what about trying to, instead of just increasing the values or changing the values, trying to incorporate what will be the impact of price elasticity, to see existing or different water pricing, how they are going to affect the demand or the consumption of water in the future, and the same with income elasticity of demand. So just to see how it works. Again, and then the last question is the question, probably very stupid question, but does the model calculate only quantities or also revenues for the district?
Okay, so I'll answer your questions one by one.
Yeah, and this is it. No more questions.
Sure. Yeah, it's no, I always appreciate your questions, Ariel. So the first one is you said the functional form and the fixed variables. I don't think I will call those variables fixed, because in the back end, if I could show you my coding, those are all functions, and those are how each of the variables affect the water demand is actually a functional form, which basically you, whoever the planner is, will not see the functional form that goes behind it, but those are all functional form. I will not say that those are coefficient, because it's not a regression model or anything. It's more, I would call it more of a projection, which kind of linearly divides, like spreads out the projection over 50 years. But those are actually functional form. And if the functional form changes, we can tweak that functional form in the back end of the coding to reflect that. So that was the first question. The second one is I forget what the second question was. The price elasticity question was so the price elasticity, it's a great point. It has been brought up with a lot of our team members too, that we should add that to this model to actually account for the price elasticity, also the impact on demand. For now, we have the model, as you said, it's version 1.0. It just like helps to feed some of the inform our planning documents. But in the long term, it will be, I think I envision to add those features to this model. We do have another tool which we actually work with California Data Collaborative to have the rate tool, which is actually does the revenue impact based on the price elasticity, and we have used it a lot in our last rate study. So, but all these factors don't go. So those are the two separate, but to have a holistic model, I think it will be great to have the price elasticity and the income elasticity. And then the last one was, can you remind me what was the last question that we asked?
Quantities or also revenues?
Oh yeah, revenue. So yeah, this model doesn't calculate the revenues, it's just the quantities. But as I said, we have another tool which actually calculates the impact on revenue, but it's based on price elasticity and our water budget factors, I believe, the billing factors, but it doesn't take into account all this whole range of factors. So that's a great idea. And we did think about this, and we will probably kind of try to incorporate all of this into one day into a holistic model. And if I have an opportunity, again, I'll come back and present over here.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. There are a couple of more questions. We have some more time. So there's a question about how, can you talk a little bit about how you calculated the savings or estimate the savings from turf removal and devices that you had in your presentation?
Yeah, so I think those saving numbers are from what we had, what we have seen in actual in the past 10 years, I would say 5 years. So that's, we take that ballpark number, but yeah, that comes from our actual data, but we as this number can change if we see that actually the trend is going a little bit different, so we can have that number. So all of these numbers is actually from what we are seeing from our data. So we are taking that number and based on what our turf removal have been and the water savings have been over the past 5 years. But that's why we have it as an interactive tool, so that we can go ahead and change the savings number, and that will change the forecasting.
Okay, perfect. And there's another question about, have you seen other agencies, you know, approaching you or your agency to do the same model in California or even at the national that they are facing some of the same issues?
Yeah. I would love to share this tool with a lot of other agencies too. I know that the few times I presented, not a lot of agencies, and I might be wrong, have done this level of forecasting and incorporate all these factors into a flexible tool like this. But definitely, if others are interested, our team will be happy to share this tool and like kind of go over the tool with them.
Perfect. And there's a question from our MPPS student Majiha, that she's asking about are all of your variables, they have equal weight, or how do you weight your variables for forecasting? I think that's what she's asking about.
Oh, the weighting. We haven't done a weighting approach yet on the variables. We do have some, the rate at which it will decrease or increase linearly over the years. But I would go back and check my coding. I don't think we, at this point, we do a lot of like weighting approach on how it will change over the years. But that's a good question. We'll have to look at which variables might need a more weighting approach.
Oh, thanks, Marabina. I don't see any more questions. And first, I'd like to thank you for presenting the work, taking the time. It's a great work, and we love to see how it develops over time. Also, I want to invite all the participants for our next webinar in April 20th. We're going to talk about about the water supply planning in Florida, and I will share the details in a couple of weeks after the finals. But that's going to also be an interesting one. By that, I think I conclude this webinar. The recording will be available after we finish up, and I will share that with the group if you like to share with your contacts. Thank you all.